Please, anytime you want to ask a question or raise a side issue, please do so. We do not have to wait till the end of the presentation. In part because I believe it is better to answer questions. This is for you all. So if it seems like what I'm speaking of is not of interest to you, then let me know and we can then move on to something else. The core of this, in part, is to detail the nature of collaborations between Perm State University and the University of Louisville. What is remarkable about it is that my university traditionally simply does not care. So it's something we did on our own. Perm State University actually is given more support for this. But even there, much of the work was due to one faculty member who, as best I can tell, never sleeps. And so she can get so much done because she has 21 hours a day to work. The collaborations, especially between institutions and countries, especially between institutions and countries that may have certain differences, are viewed as being very good. They help bring people together. But I also believe that there is a more fundamental benefit. It's in that the true wealth of any country is, of any place that we have been able to is in the people. In those situations where you see a lot of wealth, like in oil, as in the Middle East, or gold in other countries, those seem to flourish for a while, but they're extractive economies. Once they take all the oil or take all the gold, nothing's left, and those societies just collapse. The United States has been blessed with huge natural resources, but it has been able to advance because of its belief in education, in support, in advancement. And I do not know enough about Russian history and society to make that same claim, but I know that the Russian universities turn out some of the best engineers and mathematicians and physicists and lawyers and political scientists and writers. I mean, within 5 blocks of here, I think there are 10 memorials to great Russian writers. And that's very important, because that becomes what makes for greater wealth and understanding later. So what we were sort of going to talk about is how this process developed and the things we have used and been able to develop when we do not have much money to do things. But you can still do interesting things. The internet has provided an immense ability to collaborate for almost no cost. It also has provided certain problems, but we're going to focus on the benefits of this. This is Perm State University. It is the leading university in the Permsky Krai. It is mathematics and I guess computer science, physics, law, linguistics, social work, areas of that nature. There is a separate university that does engineering that is also very good. But we got to know people, in fact, this one person, at Perm State through a sister cities relationship. Sister cities is another one of these international programs whereby they try and pair a city in Russia with a city in the United States, with a city in Ecuador, with a city in West Africa, to again promote cross-cultural exchanges. For Americans, this is really important because we have a whole continent to ourselves. Everybody speaks English. Everybody is pretty much of the same religion. So we forget about most of the world. And that's not a good thing when we strive to be a world power, to not be conscious about the way things are in other countries. In fact, the way things are in other countries that are often pretty much similar to what they are in the United States. So, and this is something I have not researched, but when my children were very little, malinki, malchiki, I say little kids, we were a host family for the first Russians to come on exchange programs in the early 1990s. And it was in part to expose our children to cultures outside of the United States. And one thing and I don't know how this ties, because there are still cultural differences between Americans and Russians, but I did notice Russia also being a continent-spanning country, that there was a sense of space that was similar to that Americans have. And that Russian jokes, Russian jokes and American jokes are often very similar. American jokes and German jokes are not. Germans have a different sense of humor, I think. Still funny, but it's not the same. And it was really good for our children, all of whom have become internationalists in their approach. My youngest daughter, who just graduated high school, went off on her own and she got me to find for her a Russian tutor, so she could learn Russian on her own, because there are no schools in Louisville that teach Russian. So she decided she would learn it on her own. And I was very, very impressed with it, impressed enough to keep writing the checks. So she would learn Russian, and now she's much better than I am. So in the Sister Cities program, these exchanges, I got to know the fellow who would ultimately become the one professor in our Russian program. My university at one time you could get a degree in Russian studies. But because student numbers kept declining, no more. You can only take 2 years of Russian. So he teaches the Russian class. But he knew the people in Perm, this professor there, who wanted to do something that I'd never heard of before. She wanted to have students exchange presentations to each other over the internet, over Skype. Does anyone here use Skype anymore?
Of course.
Skype.
Of course.
Skype.
Of course.
Да, хорошо. Anybody use WhatsApp?
Yes.
WhatsApp. Yes. And that is how our exchange began. With it's very lucky because there is a 9-hour time difference, but I was teaching an early morning class, so they would stay until, say, 5 or 6 in the evening, and we'd start at 9:30 in Louisville. And students began our students would present over Skype, and they would present to us. Just as a technical note, we found it was because of bandwidth, we would send the PowerPoints there, and they would send theirs to us. And then we would just advance it. That way there was no overwhelming the system. And it went very well. The only thing which I guess bothered me was that when they were presenting to the Russian students, they would do a better job than when they were just presenting to me. And while I was a little bit irritated, it also showed me the value of this, that the students respond better when they have something real to do. Not just a class assignment, but here's something, you are now, and I'm, как сказать по-русски, shameless. I'm without shame.
Бесстыжий.
Да, как?
Бесстыжий.
Бесстыжие, yeah. Yeah, бесстыжие. Because I would say, oh, by the way, you are representing your country. Oh, really? Yes. So, and I think they did better work. It meant something to them. And the Russian students, their work, I guess probably is always superior. But you could also see how much work they put in to do a good job with the presentations. And so we continued from there. We began doing faculty exchanges this way because we could have their faculty present to our students and our faculty present to their students. And then we'd have faculty to faculty exchanges. Because we were using Skype, it cost almost nothing, and that was the key factor. Has anyone been to the United States?
Been?
Yes. You traveled? How much was your plane ticket?
Plane ticket about $400. Yeah,
Moscow to New York?
to New York. Yes.
Oh, sure. For me, it's $1,500. So it can be very expensive. But with Skype, almost nothing. But then with Skype, you don't get to taste borscht. They have borscht in the United States. It is not very good. So, how do you say that? Borscht is better here.
Более вкусно здесь.
Ah, очень
Вкуснее.
вкусно. Очень вкусно. Wait. Okay, so here's Perm. Here's my university, University of Louisville. These are the web pages if you wanted more information on them, if you cared about to find out more. But we may come back to this because these are some videos where our president is talking about the projects that we are engaged in generally. And one advantage is that we have a new president who has been there a year. Let's see. She so far has been very energetic. She had a problem in that when she came and they were examining the books for the university, they found that the previous president had made a lot of money that nobody knew about. I'll let you translate, he had been paying himself $1 million a year that nobody realized for like 7 or 8 years. So, good for him, but not good for us. So she's been trying to work with these issues. You can look for these yourself. The point of all these collaborations is to bringing people together. It's not just for some great notions of, we have been able to collaborate on, I'll fix that, but other people's as well. One of our projects, which we'll come to, was an international conference on security. And we had presentations from people in Spain, Korea, China, and India. There's a good chance it was to, again, talk about these ideas together. So, now we keep going. I keep going the wrong way. So just real quick, we want to look at these issues. These are common, I think, across countries. Privacy, security, crime, computing, and this idea of collaboration. I think we can do all of these better in collaboration. And why do we do these things? Well, protect our families, our friends, our faith community, our work community, and our political community. All of these things require certain sets of systems to work well and work efficiently. So, what is needed for us to do this? One joke we have is that serendipity is an exceptionally valuable goddess. The concept of serendipity essentially is, do you have this saying in Russian? To being in the right place at the right time? Yeah. There are people, and I'm not one of them, who can make things who will push forward and make things happen through their strength of will. But it takes a lot of strength of will. And if you're going to do that, it has to be something very important, like money, or world peace, or something like that. And again, I don't have that energy. But when something good comes along, and we say we should help those, we should work with these people because we can do some interesting and good things, then let's do so. What we have found for a collaboration to work, and this really is true between our universities, but if you have a business partner or a professional practice and you're trying to do something, you need these the same things. You need a willing and energetic partner. You need somebody who doesn't expect you to do all the work. Somebody who will take up and is willing to do all the extra hard work to make it a success. And my father, who was a businessman, said that a partnership is harder than a marriage. Because finding a good partner that you can trust and who will do their work, it doesn't happen so often. But when you find that partner, you can do amazing things. It's because it's not even 2 times as powerful. I think it's exponential. Because you get that's also why criminal organizations like the mafia are so powerful. They're multiple people who, working together, can do really difficult things. But we are not the mafia. We are here to try and do something we hope is better. The other is cost-effective channels of communication and exchange. Being able to communicate quickly, easily, and inexpensively is absolutely critical. My university has some projects going in some other countries to which they put a lot of money. One of these countries, up until recently, did not allow Skype transmissions. And it wasn't because of security reasons, it's because they had a telecommunications monopoly that didn't want the government to allow Skype to compete with them. That just made it much more difficult to ever work any projects, and ultimately we failed. We tried to get something going with the universities, and just the phone bill alone was costing $100 a month, $200 a month, $3 a month. But we have that in Skype, and now in WhatsApp, and in email. We have a way we can just plan things without spending a lot of money. But the last thing that always has to go into the analysis for any of these is the idea of reciprocal benefit. What do each of us get out of this? How does Perm State University benefit? How does the University of Louisville benefit? Sometimes people will do projects because they sound very good. You should do this, it's a good thing to do. But they don't look at the analysis, what will the people involved, how will everybody benefit? Because if somebody doesn't benefit from it, they may not work as hard or be as committed to making the project work. One thing we'll mention later is something called community engagement or community-based learning, where students go out and work in the community to try and do good things. But what they found is that often those people will go off and, in their minds, it's good, but they don't ask the people in the community, is this something you need? And so the effort may not be successful. What's worse, going back to what we saw with our students giving the presentations from US students giving presentations to Perm students, they were very vested in this. This was a chance for them to show what they learned, but also to communicate ideas that they thought were valuable. And for the Perm students, it was the same. They were communicating back to people that were listening, that would be influenced by what they said. If you get a project that's just one way, and you're not telling, for example, the students in Perm wanted to know about juvenile justice, criminal systems involving people under the age of 18. So good. So our students would do a presentation on a topic the Perm students wanted to know about. Sometimes presentations are made on topics that nobody cares about. But it's because it's what somebody wants them to hear. And then everyone feels happy. The person that wants you to hear this feels happy, but nothing has changed. You've spent the time and you don't have anything to show for it. So here's a question for you to discuss. What do you think, if you had been in one of these programs, what would you have wanted to get out of an internet exchange or a study exchange? How would you quantify and define that outcome? What would you say? Пожалуйста. Because you're closest.
So, interesting differences, maybe, or skills, as I understood.
Good.
If I understood correctly. So skills and difference between skills and gradation. I'm not sure. So small things which we don't know about differences.
Skills, new knowledge, new understanding.
Yes.
Okay. What he has just said is actually a very hot topic in American education. How do you say hot topic, or current topic, or important topic?
Важно. Важный.
Bajni. Because when you say skilled, once you say skills, then you can say, okay, I can write out a list of what I expect to see in someone who can demonstrate this skill. So then when I want to see if the student has mastered this skill, I have them demonstrate it, and then I write them up. This has some, pushback. This has some opposition from some instructors, because it also means if I can evaluate what a student has learned in under objective measures, that means I can also say if the teacher has done a good job teaching that student to acquire those skills. I don't like being held accountable. Many people don't. And so, but I think it's important, because if you're not held accountable, you may still do a good job, but other people might not do such a good job. So by defining these outcomes, in this case with our student presentations, the clearest measure for me was, did they demonstrate the ability to analyze the subject matter? Did they then demonstrate an ability to communicate it to an audience in clear and direct language, and were they able to use the technology appropriately for this? And so fairly straightforward, but have any of you used rubrics before, heard the term rubric? For the United States, it's essentially it's a checklist of these things, but it's a table. You tell a student, if you do this, you get 1 point. If you do this, you get another point. If you do this, you get another point. In other words, you break down what they learn even further. But if you don't do it, you don't get any points. And if you don't get many points, you don't get a good grade. So, all right, so skills, and then understanding. What else? What else might you want out of one of these programs? Pожалуйста.
I think the most important is to look outside the box, because every nation has some certain features and they think it's all. And if you look at another nation, they have another sort of features. And you can learn that features and make them more powerful than the web. You may increase the features that you haven't got a chance to notice before.
Very good, thank you.
Another point of view.
Yes. Yes. All right. What value is another point of view?
make new discovery, new decisions.
Yes, you don't just get
To
closed.
challenge yourself.
Critical thinking.
Oh, you said the magic word. But you, and I'm sorry, Zavut?
Andrew.
Andrew? That's right, you told me. And your name?
Oh.
Zavut?
My name is Kate,
Kate?
and the first point is to challenge yourself, just to know what you can do or what you cannot.
All right, good.
I'm
Excellent.
just thinking about it.
Oh, good. And you said that he said the magic words, critical thinking. So you read a lot about American education?
Not exactly. I believe it's some kind to, as the previous speaker told, it's a way to get out of the box and to try to assess the facts and think. Let's say facts, probably some ideas, events, and to try to analyze it and make the conclusions. And if you have only one piece of the picture, you will do it in a narrow, let's say, egoistic way. Let's put it
Yes.
in these words. But if you have a number of different opinions or views, you can combine it, and you can create some kind of middle layout, and you can take into account all of the factors and smaller things, and it will allow you to make better decision at the end.
Yes.
So it's some kind of logic, I believe. Yeah.
Yes, good, excellent. Yes, it's all the new discoveries forever have been made by people who were thinking outside of the box. They did not let the box close them in. The critical thinking movement in the United States, which is in a lot of schools, essentially lays out the things we want a student to learn about thinking, about how to look at the world and not let their fantasies, not let their comic books describe the world for them. Sensitive question. What do you think an American college student thinks about Russia?
Oh my God.
Водка, медведя.
What the dog?
Prejudice. A lot of prejudice.
Yes.
Totalitarianism, communism still, probably in some parts
Yes.
of
Yes.
our country.
We'll get back to that vodka thing in a minute, but yes.
It's
Is
What-
your question pertaining to the average American student or one who has studied Russia and Russian culture?
The average American student.
Okay, then I'm not representative.
Okay, but your colleagues, where'd you study?
I studied in Pennsylvania at Dickinson College.
Oh, nice school. All right, what would you say your colleagues who are not in Russian studies knew about Russia or thought about Russia?
So I get this question. I've lived in Russia now for 5.5 years. So I get this question quite often. And I always tell my Russian friends, colleagues, counterparts, people who are engaged in conversation with me at the time, that thinking we Americans know what a balalaika is actually more credit than we should be given. I remember when I first went to Russia to study Russian, they always asked what my impressions were, and really I do not remember knowing a single thing about Russia, Russians, so there wasn't really any strongly positive or strongly negative connotations. Of course, we all know Putin, and he's somewhere shirtless in the wilderness. But other than those very
Well, but we've got Donald Trump.
yeah. But again, these are very surface level media
Impressions. Yes,
portrayals.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Okay. And in fact, oh yes, I guess, sorry. Yes, and in fact, they don't typically think much at all because they're looking to get a job, finish school, what they hear is like on TV, and but I mean, so they see a story about what the Internet Service Bureau tried to influence the elections, and of course most of them will say, well, we don't do that. Isn't that what Voice of America is all about? So, but that's just it. It's more ignorance than anything. If they show hostility, well, that means they're paying more attention than most. But because they have something they're looking at, but they don't look much. They don't look much at those things. What they do look at increasingly in the news are issues of geopolitical conflict, and that becomes an issue of discussion. But getting them to reach a better point, like, okay, how can this be a benefit to me, I think is part of what this is all about. Most American college students do not read Dostoevsky, but those that do have a decidedly different perception, because they think, well, this is great stuff. And those that read Gogol, is that how you pronounce it? They think this must be the strangest place in the world. But that's the point is, it's good. They're reading, they're learning, and they're opening their minds up. So our challenge, how do I take students that would never have read Dostoevsky and get them to think, well, maybe I should? Or I was at the Musei Bulgakov today. I mean, if we get them to read The Master and Margarita, that would be a great thing, because I think they would just find it hilarious. What might be stranger is that they might read it and think, oh, this is talking about my government today here in the United States. So there are universalities, but it's getting that exposure, getting outside of the box, because it's really comfortable to be in the box. It's just so easy. Now, if we had to try and quantify some of the benefits, because if we're doing a grant application and we said we want them to think out of the box, they're going to want more. And sometimes they don't like to, people with money don't like to think about that internal issue. They want something they can grab. So we look at opportunities to learn English, to work on better English, learning legal English, learning Russian deeply. I mean, I think you've got to come here. What do you think? If you had never come to Russia, would your Russian speaking abilities be as good?
No, you have to.
I mean, I know it's a softball question, but yes. My department is in criminal justice, that's criminal law. So we look more broadly at law because most people do not practice criminal law. They will go into civil law, transactional work, but that's also good. So we're looking at opportunities to give lectures and discussion and exchange on these issues. And then lastly, we discuss the way to trade on policy discussions, because it's by having those discussions, and they don't have to be at the level of when we're shooting at each other. They can be down here before that happens, so that we can solve problems more easily and more efficiently, because there are a lot of things that need to be fixed regardless. We found that real-time in-person exchanges, like what we're doing now, are really great, but they're also expensive. And so trying to figure a way around that is part of what our ongoing challenge is. It's particularly challenging for us to bring Russian students to the United States, because everything is so much more expensive there. And my university we have a financial administration. They don't want to give up a penny. World peace, nah, I don't care about that. The exchange of ideas, no, give me money. So we have to figure out how to make them happy, because I mean, American education is just it's too expensive for Americans. So that's very bad. But we're still trying to work on that. the real-time, on-time things like the lectures back and forth have proven to be very effective. The time gap's still a problem, but they get to interact and see people and talk to them, ask questions of people they would never have expected to ever talk to. I would hazard to guess every single student that we had, if you'd at my school, have said, "Do you think you'll ever, ever talk to a Russian student?" And no, why? There are none here. So this is a way. And we've had some success. We've had students say, "Well, maybe it's something I need to know," and they learn it, and then they come here for a visit. Part of what we're trying to do. All right, what do you think is the biggest barrier for real-time, in-person exchange for American students to come here?
Visa.
Okay.
Visa.
Visa takes, yes, it takes time, but eventually the consulate will just give up and give you the visa. But you're close, yes.
I was going to say convincing American parents that it's safe.
I mean, yeah, compared to what? Yes. American parents, yes. I mean, I'm trying to think, oh God, yes. Some of our students have never been out of our state, I guess the CRI. They've never, I had a student, we did a program in Trinidad of all places, in the Caribbean. I had a student who had never been on a jet plane before. So they just you don't travel. Not just do you not travel other countries and other languages, you just don't leave your neighborhood. So that's something to overcome. Good. What else? What else might you think will hold people back from coming over here?
Bad climate.
Okay.
Bad climate.
Very cold in winter.
Well, yes. I mean, the image. I mean, the image of that Moscow should be under 5 feet of snow right now would not be uncommon. Although, as we know, it's like 87 degrees outside. Sorry, Fahrenheit. Yes.
Passports.
Passports, visas.
A third of Americans, only a third of Americans have passports.
Yes. So then to explain to them, you need to get a passport.
$500.
Oh, it's expensive.
Relationship collapse. Collapse with United States and Russia.
Partly, although I still think Russia is actually more welcoming of American visitors than the U.S. is of Russian visitors. Although that gets into policies involving our foreign agency, which I can't talk about because they're here. But I was surprised. My former students were telling me that the workaround for that, it's easier and cheaper and quicker to fly to Frankfurt, Germany and get your visa at the U.S. Embassy there, or the consulate there, than to come to Moscow, because the lines are so long here. So okay, that works. I mean, that's fine. But it's really a precursor problem, and maybe your experience. Russian is considered a very difficult language. And like with my daughter, none of our high schools below teach Russian. So you have to have something special that sparks you to want to study it. But once you do, and if you put the time into it, I think it's a very enriching experience. And my university has had a disproportionate number of students to receive Fulbright scholarships and critical language scholarships because of their Russian skills than any other university in Kentucky. But it's getting them to make that step. So, if we can get them to do that, we think coming here would be, I mean, obviously, you have to come here. And we think Perm would be the best place to go because it's manageable, it's about the same size as Louisville, that's why it's our sister city, it's a river city, and it's easy to get around, easy to go to class. If they came to Moscow
for a few days, that's fine. Everybody should come to visit. This is my first time in Moscow, except through Sheremetyevo. But if they came to Moscow to study for 5 weeks, they would party for 4 weeks. I'm just amazed at the number of clubs here, all the underground, up high. I mean, nice clubs, but they're here to learn Russian. By gosh, so we're trying to work it both ways, so it works for both groups of students. The asynchronous online, that's where we will do lectures, but we'll record narration. Basically, we're doing a video or something short to a point, and then they will play that, and then our colleagues back at Perm will then discuss the issues there with them. So, now part of the way to get the exchange rolling is through internships and cooperative engagement, community engagement. Because my university wants a lot of money, what we have been able to do is that, because my department chair is very, very clever, we can sponsor them for accounts. So they get a university identification card that lets them ride the buses for free. They get to use email, they get to use the Blackboard, our online teaching system. They get they get the library, they get the basketball courts. And I did not realize, I mean, I knew Russia had great basketball players. I didn't realize how much Russians played basketball until they all came and they were all up playing up on Russians play a really rough basketball style. I mean, like, I'm glad I did not play. But then what we would do is we would set up internships for them. They would go down and work with the judges and administrators and clerks at our state court. They would come in with the judges, they would watch the proceedings. Some of the judges would actually have them do work on cases, because they're all law students. And so, okay, much of this is procedural. Here's a case file. Why don't you read there's a motion in for a judgment. Why don't you read the memoranda and tell me how you would rule on this case? And they would watch jury trials, which you do not have here, except I think, in death penalty cases. But they would see how that was done, and they would start at our very lowest court level, which handled traffic tickets and domestic violence and misdemeanors, small crimes. And they would go up to our general trial court, then they would go up to our court of appeals, then they would meet with our Supreme Court justice. So they got to see the entire court system. And the judges loved it, the clerks loved it, because here was somebody that actually cared about the court system. So they learned a great deal. We didn't have to pay anything for it. They didn't have to pay anything for it. So we were able to get this educational experience for no money. And several of this, in fact, I had dinner with
Attention in the embassy, attention on compound. Attention in the embassy, attention on compound. The time is now 1900. All personnel planning to stay after hours must contact post 1 at extension 6666. I say again, all personnel planning to stay after hours must contact post 1 at extension 6666. Thank you.
Do they appreciate the irony of the number being 666? Okay. There we go. See, it's Bulgakov, the Master and Margarita. That's what they read in that little office of theirs. So we're able to get the experience for them without any charge. My two students who came up here and now work for law firms here in Moscow, both said that it was something that they were able to put on their resume, and it was something that was discussed during their interviews, because it meant that, unlike most other law students, they actually had seen the American court system in action. It's a common law system, somewhat different from the civil law traditions of Europe, including Russia. So it both gave them a greater understanding of a different legal system, but one which helped them professionally. So that was great. I felt good. It was good to know that. the downside to this, it's still labor intensive. It still requires a lot of attention. So we were able to do it for 3 years, but then it dropped off when I was given some other duties to do. So those duties have now gone away. So we're looking to try and revive the program. Although we're also trying to be actually more aggressive. We are trying to get funding because for an American student to come to Perm, all we have to do is convince them it's a good idea. And it's not, because the tuition at Perm State University is very low compared to a US university. And we've already worked out how we can get their credits from Perm transferred back to the United States. So the money they would save in tuition dollars would pay for the ticket and housing and tuition at PEGU. So it works out perfectly. As long as our central administration doesn't find out, and then they're going to want to charge our students more. But we'll work with that when it happens. What we're trying to do is getting funding for students from PEGU, and actually students from Russia generally. If not to study for credit, then to be allowed to take the classes on an audit basis, and then let their home universities give them credit for the studies. So that way, because you've got the tuition problem, which we're trying to overcome. The other is the cost of living. Food and such items like that are about the same. But housing is incredibly more expensive in the United States. It's more typical of Moscow than a Perm. So we're trying to figure how we can overcome that problem as well. We're working on it. We hope we can do it. And what we hope is that we can make it generally available to other students in Russia as well. Quick question, what is your discipline?
Economics.
Economics? Maybe we can bring you in. We'll come back to your question about the way in which you apply for financial support to study at an American institution. So that's important. 2 of our best computer science graduates from our doctoral program at the University of Louisville were both physics students at PEGU who came for, I don't think they had support to get their master's there, but then they were offered full support computer science. They got tuition and I think the stipend, which is about $20,000 a year to live. So I mean, there's incredible talent here. And they were able to do very well. They also won, Artur won a student, this was crazy. I should be so lucky. He won a student competition as a doctoral student. That, I think from Microsoft or Facebook, that paid him $25,000. That's not right. I should have gotten that. But so again, they did good work. But they still went back to Perm to marry, because they wanted to marry somebody from Russia, but they're, of course. Lastly, we've been able to get some other things that don't cost much except time, and that's the issue of projects and publications. If you're in the university, you have to publish in peer-reviewed journals. It's in fact the most important thing most universities look at for promotion and tenure. You could do Nobel Prize winning work, saving people. But it only counts if you can write an article about it that gets published. It's not quite that bad, but if it's anything less than a Nobel Prize, you're out of luck. So we've been able to do a number of things. The key in any of this is rigor with the process. Again, not to beat on our colleagues from the State Department, but the United States over the past 50 years has sometimes provided funding for projects that they just sounded really good, but they're not connected to tangible outcomes. So sometimes at the end of the project, the good things we'd hoped to happen have not happened. So because we have so little money, the idea is that everything we do has to produce something worthwhile. before we begin to put our time into it. Now, your colleague had mentioned critical thinking. This is part of what we are developing at U of L, or using at U of L. These are some of the ideas, both with critical thinking, but also community engagement. Community engagement is sort of what we do when our students present to each other. You're no longer just doing a presentation to me, your teacher, because it doesn't really matter, does it? All it gets you is a grade. But now, you're going to represent your country, and you're going to be responsible for the understanding these Russian law students have of how your country functions. If you fail, you're a bad person. You know, that's a cheap way to incentivize, but it can work. So you have to first know what do you want to achieve. Well, for us and for PEGU, we are trying to get our students to think outside of the box. Think something bigger, but realize, okay, if you want to think it, you have a responsibility to develop your skills. And if you want to do something, if you want to achieve something, you have that responsibility to build up your power, your skills. You've got to do it. Don't expect me, your teacher, to tell you what to do. You've got to be able to do it on your own. Part of this is granularity, what they call the question at issue. What is it you're trying to do? Don't just do it. You're not here to do a presentation to get a grade. You're here to do a presentation to help the person to whom you are presenting do something. They will have skills or knowledge at the end of your presentation that they did not have before, and it's skills and knowledge that will help them do something. Do something, we hope, very soon. You break it down further. What facts or data do you need? What are the ideas or theories or principles you're going to apply, that you're going to communicate? Well, I never thought about what the ideas were. And this is not, I think, unique to the United States, but part of the idea behind critical thinking is we want you to stop. Why are you doing what you're doing? Think about it first. Is this a preconception you have? Or is it something that you arrive through fact-based analysis? And we all have preconceptions, Americans more than many. And sometimes it's not because they're bad people, it's because this is just stuff they've heard and nobody has ever challenged it. Everybody's heard of the Nazis, right? You know, I consider them bad guys. In fact, I just bought this amazing collection of World War II propaganda posters. Russian posters depicting the Nazis. And they're great, they're better than anything we produced, attacking the Nazis. You're familiar with Mussolini, who was the fascist leader of Italy during that same period. So I had this one great student, this kid was really smart, and we were talking about situations between policy and performance. And he said, yeah, it's like when, I know the Nazis did bad things, but they made the trains run on time. Which by the way is a mashup. Mussolini made the trains run on time, and Hitler was the BFF of Mussolini. So he was like somewhere along the line they had jammed up history. But it was also completely wrong, because, well, rather, did you know how the Nazis were able to get this performance? Did you know about the slave labor? Did you know about the exploitation of minority populations? No, I didn't know that, because we don't do as good a job in history class as we should in our lower levels. But it was okay. He felt comfortable enough to say this, so we could then talk about it. And at the end, he thought, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I didn't realize that the Nazis were not good people. At pretty much every level. I got to say, I was just like, wow, what? it took me a few seconds to kind of think how to respond to that, but that's still okay, because now you've been able to take facts and data and change somebody's understanding in what I think would be to a more correct view of the world. Concepts and theories. What am I taking for granted that forms the basis of my thinking? And that's a real problem with our students. They all have, some of them have crazy ideas. And because everybody in the United States, did you know that there are 3 firearms for every citizen of the United States? 3 guns? I mean, it's dangerous to have ideas that you have not thought through. And by the way, I probably have 1 gun. Does that mean somebody else though has got 5 guns, because he's kept making up for me. So no, so it's being able to shake this up, making somebody says, yeah, I believe this, but maybe I should check it out. Interpretation, implications, points of view, looking beyond your point of view. This is what we've been able to get out of these exchanges, because, Russia's way over there, and like you're saying, a bunch of communists, but not anymore, but strange stuff. But being able to say that, look, your vision is wrong, it's great. I mean, for that's worth a college education. And this is just a set of sort of criteria when you're designing one of these courses to try to make sure you're pushing them in the right direction. We actually have this to a Central American country, very poor, but we have sort of the same outcomes. The students actually go there. They go there for just a week, and they work in the community as teachers. But they come back and they say, I didn't know. They said, the people there are wonderful. They're not like I thought they would be. And that's...
Very much. Colette? So in this slide, what I've included in this slide here is just a graphic to give you a sense of how we try to think about this entire process as a cycle. So what you see is in the yellow, we write our outcomes. This is that question. What do you want people to be learning? And the next part is, well, you teach them it, or you have them have experiences, you have them engage, you do assignments. You do sort of a check-in with our green section, and you determine, yeah, all right, we do know that they're doing. But then we take a look at our data and we say, what do we want to do next? What do we want to revise? And how do we move forward? And so that is part of why we include the slides about assessment, because part of our own thinking is that it requires us to continue to go back to the messy issues and figure out what we want to do next. All right, so
this is part of what we're trying to push, say, within these. And our operating principle is that intercultural communication, to use a term that people like to use because people give out grant monies when they do intercultural communication.
perhaps the
overall aspect of this is to look at the kinds of things which your department, particularly with the help of Professor Polyakova and her outstanding colleagues, have done over the years. The student-faculty exchanges have followed the same model, both with faculty from State University coming here to Louisville and our faculty going to visit and teach there in Perm.
Just real quick on the scholarship issue. So once you get to know people, you know what they do, you can work together on things. One of the things that I was surprised about was how little there was out in English language journals about aspects of technology and criminal law in the Russian Federation. So the very first thing we got published, actually it's further down, this is in reverse order, but it was where my colleagues at PEGU and I and some other folks began writing on these. The most recent one, which just came out, just finished the editorial process. Those of you that decide to write for a journal, I'll warn you, the editorial process, they come back and forth, so be prepared to do a lot of work, but it's very satisfying.
because if your ideas are good, you get to push them out to the world. The one that's just coming out now is about digital forensics and electronic evidence in the world. So we've had colleagues from Hungary, China, Hong Kong, Korea, Spain, and Russia, thanks to this. And like I said, because there's so little about Russia, which makes no sense whatsoever, but just the way it is, I think this is helping to fill a gap. Back in December, we did for the Institute for Electronic and Electrical Engineers symposium on signal processing regarding security issues in electronic digital objects. In 2016, we discussed issues of black box data recorders. Every one of you has a car that has a computer that's recording everything you do. Well, that becomes an issue of evidence, because if you have an accident or you have a crime, that evidence is very valuable. So we wrote a paper on that. This came out of nowhere, but it was okay. This was on the regulatory aspects of cloud computing in business environments. Cloud services are everywhere, in part because they're cheap, they're powerful, and you can localize security of the system at the cloud center. Computer security is a huge issue everywhere in the world, and this takes care of it. This was more my son than me, and our colleagues at PEGU on linguistic implementations in computer games and virtual world design. Anybody here ever play video games? Computer games?
Yes.
You never played a video game?
I played, but I'm not playing now.
Okay. How about you? I want to play, but there's no time. Tatiana? Video game? No? We'll get you some.
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
I have never.
Can you get some video game consoles here?
We will need to think about that.
Okay. But they are wonderful. It's interesting what you can learn with them. So, but our issue here was, this is where the linguistic analyses regarding English, Russian interpretation play a role. How do you deal with languages across nations in games? And it's not just languages across countries. You played Grand Theft Auto?
Yeah.
Grand Theft Auto?
Yeah.
Yeah?
The first part and the second one, many years ago.
Yes, yes. Well, but I played it. I had to because my son made me. And we actually deconstructed it for this article along with our colleagues at PEGU, because they tried to create the culture of South Central Los Angeles, which speaks a language most Americans don't understand. So how they actually, and Rockstar Games, right? Did they make? Yep. Rockstar Games sent linguistics teams out to the neighborhood to record people and translate what they were saying in the context so that the game had historical accuracy to it. So we see more and more of this. But our first big article was a comparative review of cybercrime law and digital forensics in Russia, the United States, and under the Convention on Cybercrime of the Council of Europe. It is probably the most cited article that we have written, and partly because it came out in 2012, and this was in the Northern Kentucky Law Review. But because nobody, as we can tell, there's so few articles that talk about Russia and its legal system and these issues. Now, if you consider, well, all right, so is Russia a technological powerhouse? What would you say? You're supposed to say yes, but what?
Partially.
Partially? Is Russia a computing powerhouse?
To a certain extent.
Hmm?
To a certain extent.
More than others.
Yeah. I think it's, I think it's an incredible computing center. They also have some, that's another issue. But their technology for computing, and thus the problems with cybercrime, is significant. And the fact that people in the West don't have an understanding of the legal sphere for this, I find just baffling. So this was our effort to try and overcome some of that. And because it's both sided, means that other people are looking at it. Because if you're trying to create collaboration in law, you need to understand the law itself. So
The perhaps hallmark, just
all right.
And here we have just some of the folks from around the world who have been a part of this. Korea, Spain,
Korea,
the United States, China. It was a remarkable experience for, I think, everyone.
This was we collaborated on it was a symposium, international symposium on security of the individual, state, and society. And I had to ask, I said, is it safe for us to talk about this? Won't people get upset? She said, no, not a problem. And in fact, all the papers, what was particularly interesting was that none of the papers entered into any kind of controversial topics between US and Russia, because there were so many other areas of common discussion. Everybody played it safe. So, and it worked out very well. See, and in fact, the people, everybody here, all of their papers were published in the Journal of Digital Forensic Security and Law, which is a peer-reviewed publication, and so everybody got another publication credit. So, more importantly, JDFSL is an online publication. So all the work that everybody did is available publicly. And it's indexed on Scopus. I think it's indexed on Web of Science, as well as on Google. But good things, good stuff all around. Wait. Historically, just over the past 10 years, these are all the different folks we've had a chance to work with. What's important is, you may notice these are all people that actually put themselves out to make these exchanges work. Perm State, the Ministry of Education for the CRI, the Office of International Relations for Perm City Government, the Gorky Library in Perm, the former American Corner, the Academy for National Economic Administration, Moscow Institute of Public Administration, Perm State Agricultural Academy. They were all very helpful. It is unfortunate that the only American institution up here is our consulate in Ekaterinburg, but that's just the way it is. But everybody's help played a great role in us getting these things done. Talk about the internships.
The future.
What about the future? What do you think? Are these efforts worth continuing, or do you think they're just going to not go anywhere?
Definitely.
They're not going to go anywhere?
No, I think definitely you need to continue.
Okay. Why?
Because all decisions that a human makes, it's like a machine. The more information you have, the more right decision you make, the more discovery you make, and it depends on the quality and quantity of information. Okay. And these methods you practice, they helps to make to pour more information to students.
But isn't it easier to make decisions with no information?
I suppose no. Of course, there is another route. You can read books, you can watch movies, but it's another sort of information, and you can use it another ways.
Right. What was the last movie that had Russians in it? Do y'all recall?
Russian what? Russian what? I don't understand.
What was the last big American movie where Russians played a role?
John Wick?
Okay, well, I tried. Has anyone seen John Wick?
No, not yet.
Okay. What does John Wick do?
generally
Kills
do.
Russians?
Yeah, what is his profession?
He kills people.
Right,
And
so-
he's from Belarus.
So he's not really Russian, though, right? He's really Belarusian. Okay. But yeah, like a really good assassin, of course, he would be Belarusian. So you're right. Just looking at movies or even the news sometimes doesn't do the job. What do you think? Why don't you give her the microphone?
I think it do the job, but in another way.
We're going to ask you next.
It's also practical.
Well, we're going to ask you next. Yes.
I'm just keep thinking about it, but the work is great and it should be done just for us not to have all those prejudices. Because films, okay, it's a really good source of information or whatever you.
Really good assassin, yes.
Yeah, you know much about that, but to know people, to know what is the community like, it's another way of thinking and another way of making your own life. It's the way to get. I don't know. I'm still thinking over your speech. That's why I'm not ready to give you a feedback right now. Probably a minute more.
Понимаю.
Okay.
It's but yes.
Okay,
Пожалуйста.
Boys.
Okay.
Okay.
Because close.
Come on.
By the way, you don't have to answer my question. If there's something else you would like answered.
No.
All right, Vika, tell us about. Do you want to study in the United States? Maybe yes.
At
Maybe
all? About what?
Anything.
No. Economics. Want to study economics in the United States? Maybe.
I would like to study economics in the United States.
Okay. How should we get Vika to the United States?
By plane.
All right. So, should we collect money now?
Crowdfunding.
Yes.
Crowdfunding.
Crowdfunding. Yes.
It's a good idea for crowdfunding.
Yes. We actually have an exceptionally clever and good example on how to get to the United States. So, Ms. Viola, tell us about study. How did you got an all expenses paid trip to the United States, right? For a year.
Yeah. Has anyone heard about Fulbright Scholarship? Fulbright?
I have.
Yes. So we're 3 Fulbrighters. This is quite a big concentration of Fulbrighters in one room. So this is one of the programs, grant programs that is available to Russian students, and not only students but to Russians. And also, if you are not Russian, you should check it out. It is probably available in your country too. And you can apply for a different type of a program. It can be a program to get a master's degree, or in my case, it was a program for an English language teacher to go and teach your own language, so in my case, Russian, to American students for 1 year. But there are also programs if you are a university lecturer, or also if you work in culture or do research. And what you do is you apply, and if you win, this is a competitive scholarship, then you get a chance to go to the US and don't need to worry about money or anything. And this is an amazing experience. So, especially you, as a student, you should check it out. It's Fulbright. You can find it, find some information about it on the US Embassy website. If you go to this horizontal menu, and there you have this Education and Culture tab, and you go there to Academic Exchanges and check it out. It will be one of the programs listed, but you can also check out the other ones. So,
Okay, thank you. And Anton is a student, yes, political science.
Yeah. Okay, so.
Are you a student?
Yes, I'm a spin doctor too.
A spin doctor?
So, yes.
Oh, show. You were made for the United States. Panama, you spin doctor? Viola, would you explain spin doctor to?
I'm not sure what is this.
It's a specialist who study political science.
I don't think so. I think it has a negative connotation, doesn't it? Spin doctor?
Not if you are one.
Spin doctor is somebody, in my understanding, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, somebody who can take a sentence or an event and put it in a very positive light.
Spin it, turn it around.
Spin the angle.
Yeah.
So, man trips and loses 3 teeth can say, man got very intimately acquainted with the ground and ended up with some dental alterations.
It was a good thing.
Yes, you show everything through lens of positive for your candidate.
Yes.
And you remain buried all negative.
Or just a по-русски.
Yeah, let me look it up because I'm not sure.
Ну, человек, который управляет репутацией, ну, пиар, грубо говоря, политолог.
Very, very important in the United States. Because we do nothing wrong. We are always right. So.
We're always the good guys.
Yes.
So the translations that this online dictionary gives are разработчик стратегии публичного поведения, мастер медийных манипуляций, мастер пиар-манипуляций, манипулятор общественным мнением, политдизайнер, пиарщик, раскрутчик, специалист по раскрутке, политтехнолог, пропагандист.
A person who taps into information.
Yes. Propagandist. Yeah. Sure. Well, what you want to do is an internship in Congress. Well, those, all right, those are possible. They're possible even when you were out of school. You simply look, you make the, like, if you wanted to work with a congressman or an agency, you could contact and say, I'd like to come do an internship with you. They often have offices that handle internships, and they will set it up. Again, the challenge, I mean, DC is super expensive for Americans. So again, it's a challenge, the issue is going to be living expenses. But you would become, if you worked for a congressman, you would be the best propagandist in town. But you would also learn how to counter that. You would learn how the skills to say, wait, no, that's not true. Was it nie pravda? Not the newspaper. No. And then learn, but not just say that's not true. It's how you then convince the people you're talking to of what the truth is, so that they will say, oh, you're right, this guy is очень плохо, very bad person. Good. You also can look, it's an area, you can also look at universities. You do research online. Many universities have assistantships. If they do not have if they do not have
a doctoral program, and sometimes even with, you can do your master's and they will provide you with a stipend to live, and they cover your tuition. And that way, you can finish the program there. I think your English, even though you say it's not good, it is good enough for you to work in that environment. But what they will look at is your grades. There is the graduate research examination, graduate record exam, the GRE. You have to take that and do well. There's then some hellish thing called the TOEFL. What is the TOEFL exactly?
This is test of English as a foreign language. It's, if you heard about IELTS, this is an American sort of equivalent of that.
What's the main difference? Because currently I'm preparing for IELTS.
Oh, well, the test format is different with IELTS. It's 2 days if they haven't changed it, and I think one is you actually talk to a person, a real person with TOEFL. You do it. It's like a 4-hour-long test in front of a computer. So I think it's better. And I think well, there are different types of IELTS. It can be general academic. TOEFL is only academic. Yeah. So, and I think I like TOEFL more than IELTS.
But IELTS is long living and TOEFL is only for 2 years.
IELTS is it's also only for 2 years.
Okay,
It's only for 2
That's
years.
right.
That's how they
For 2
make
years
money,
only.
right? It only makes sense. Yeah.
And so you have to, most schools require you to do a certain score on that. My colleagues, they are not happy with the TOEFL. The two PhD graduates from Perm State University in computer science, who were the top students at the university that year, both of them did not have a high enough TOEFL score to be admitted. And a very silly person in the dean's office was not going to let them take the assistantships. And so it was a huge fight between the computer science department chair and the professor who had the money saying, I want these two students, and this bureaucrat. And they eventually won. They got what was called a conditional admission. So you have to take then you get a year to practice your English, and then you take the test. And they did fine. But just, you have to be careful with that, because some schools are very bureaucratic. And, you know, it's not what you know, it's what you can show on somebody else's test. But you can do that for a master's, you can do that for a PhD, and like I say, the Russian students that have studied at U of L have all done really well. They've been superb. So if something you want to do, it's worth doing. It's worth doing it for a year. So, all right, good. And Tom, did you have a question?
So, I'm not sure now.
Think.
Пожалуйста. My hand is to him.
Oh, there we go.
What?
I'm very like influence IT technology and law.
College.
I think this is very perspective. And I think about chatbot with linguistic analysis. I think about R, Python in this specific. And I think about project in this sphere.
Mm-hmm. Do you program in R?
Little.
Okay.
We use Unreal Engine and another program. R and Python is very interesting.
Okay. Do you use Unreal Engine for game programming or statistical analysis?
Statistical analysis and for VR.
For, wait, beer?
VR.
Virtual reality. Oh, VR. VR. I kept thinking beer. Sorry. It's Nina.
My pronounce is worst.
Yes. Спасибо, madame. Спасибо. All right. Пожалуйста.
Okay, I can ask question. Okay. So, I'm studying political science, and so what could I do? What do you think if I could help you with your job in Moscow? I'm a PhD student, so probably if there is any chance, no, not chance. So if you need something what I could do as student of another university, so just because now this is summertime and
sorry,
I have some free time.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So there is a question.
When do you get your PhD?
I get in now. So now it's end of first year of PhD, and so 2 more years.
Wow.
But of course there is a lot of free time because first of all PhD it's it's writing articles, it's writing.
Yes.
No lections, no studies, but only writing.
Okay. What did you think about Miss Viola's suggestion of a Fulbright?
Miss Viola, yeah, it's pretty interesting. I think I will check it out, of course.
Good. We had a recent doctoral graduate from Moscow who taught as a Fulbright scholar at my university. And they had several, and the students really enjoyed them. Of course, the Russian teachers made them work too hard. But
Okay, good. So, what do you think? Does anybody else here program in Python or program in R, or use those languages for statistical analyses? Something to keep in mind. You will probably see it at some point. Political science in the United States is heavily based on statistical analyses of data. And so, why do you like R?
Open system, more packet, specific packet.
Okay. Yeah, it gives you greater power to do the analyses.
I can use psi-metric packet. I can use statistic packet for analysis. I know Pearson, man-Whitney, and I use it in my job.
Okay. Very good. Well, here's another project. If you just have too much free time, you're familiar with IBM, the American Computer Services Company. They have an office here in either Moscow or St. Petersburg. Moscow?
Yeah.
Do you work with them at all?
I worked with them in the past. They were the partners of my previous corporation. I worked for AC Nielsen.
Oh, wow.
For 5 years, including relocation to Australia. Then I got back.
Sorry.
What?
Oh, so everybody can hear you. You were in
okay.
Australia
Thank
for a
you.
while?
Yeah, I lived in Australia for a year and a half. Pretty crazy English, to be honest.
Hey, mate.
Might.
Hey,
Yeah.
might.
Yeah, even my fellow teammates from UK, they just told me that it was complicated for them to understand their clients speaking by telephone. For them, for native speakers. Okay, challenge accepted. So what I'm trying to say is, AC Nielsen is actually a leader. It's a global leader of marketing research, data science, and all the related stuff. And as far as I know, they're always looking for data scientists, analysts, research guys. So I believe there is a plenty of open positions globally.
Okay.
Yeah, and IBM was a partner, so they just provided their cloud solutions for Nielsen, because Nielsen is not a software or IT company, so IBM was their partner, third-party company, assisting the clients. Well, that's it.
All right, good. No, do you work for Nielsen? Do you work for Nielsen? Just by coincidence?
Don't understand.
Nelson.
Do you work for the person he used to work for?
We работали на Нельсон.
Nielsen
Мы
and
работали
IBM.
на Нельсон. Получается так.
Okay. This is actually a project we're going to talk about. This is for the future. But IBM it's a global company. So they now they're pushing an initiative called the Ibm Skills Academy that is meant to teach computational skills, R, statistical analysis, AI.
SPSS, Stata Tech,
Yeah,
Texas.
yeah. All of these things, but to non-computer science people. And they have a huge open source portal for these trainings. But they also, if they work an agreement with a university, they will provide free access to the software as well as instructors. So we are beginning that program at my university. We're going to look at how, but I said, so well, what about
Russia, you don't work there. You wouldn't work this there, wouldn't they? They said, well, of course we would. Why not? So we're going to see if we can bring it to PEGU for its non-computer science students. Its political science students, law, social work, economics. What discipline? Whatever you do, computing skills would help, right?
Yes.
Sure. What do you do?
Banking and accounting.
Oh, you use computers all the time.
All the time.
Sorry.
Therapy.
Yes. How about you?
Development. IT development.
Well, see, there we go. All right. What about your colleague in the back, the political scientist, the spin doctor?
So there is a big split in at my university, political analysis, who use those mathematical features, and political coordination or political management. So I'm at the second one. I don't use it. At the first case, you use Python, R, and so on, and at the second case, you aimed on a philosophy and political theory and etc.
Very good. So you're ahead of our political science students. So we have to catch up. So, by the way, I do not know Python, I do not know R, so you're all ahead of me. But by the end of the summer, I will be up there with you. Пожалуйста. What do you think about computation, the new level of computational studies for all people? Is it possible?
Yes.
That's good. That's hope. Too many people in the United States would say, no, we're too dumb. We drink too much. But that's not. But good. Thank you. Questions? Do you have any last questions? Because I keep looking at that clock, then I realize that it's broken. So.
May I ask the question?
Of course.
So my question will be connected rather with my brother than with myself. So my brother is working in the Supreme Court in Russia, and he has a legal degree. So he spent like 8 years in legal area, and he's 31 now, and he thinks, actually he considers to continue his career in international self-development. So he's looking for some opportunities to study international law, because now he works in Supreme Court in Russia, and he knows that nowadays the world becomes more and more global, and who knows, the global, let's say the global legal system can be changed in 10 or 20 years.
Yes.
Oh, thanks. And who knows, even the internal legislation system, internal legal system in Russia can be changed as well. So that's why he wants to look 2 steps forward, to be 2 steps forward. And probably, is there any chance or opportunity to, let's say, study not from the scratch, or it's rather, I don't know how to spell it correctly, it's rather restudying.
Right.
He has an experience, like 8 years, in various courts within Moscow and Moscow area and Supreme Court. So, yeah, that's it. Any chance to study abroad? He has a good English, like 7 or 7.5 files, so
right.
It's pretty good, I believe. Yeah.
What? Yes. All right. Yes. And this is sort of a variation of Vika's point. There are a number of programs. There are actually some international law graduate schools here in Moscow. I think there's Pericles. One of my students went there. But my other student went to school in the Netherlands, Tilburg, to get a Master of Laws there.
The difference being these private schools are expensive. He could conceivably look to see if any American schools, or English schools, or Dutch schools, or German schools offer programs that are affordable to go into those universities and study there. And some of them have programs that are all in English. Because when you have the Master of Laws in International Law, that gives you the credential as well as the area of study. There is a short 6-week program at The Hague, at the International Court of Justice. It's 3 weeks private international law and then 3 weeks public international law. It's mostly like lectures and introduction to proceedings at the ICJ. But that's one way to orient to that discipline. It would give him also that credit, that little certificate. One thing that's nice is that it's, because I went there in the mid-'80s, it was very inexpensive, and they also arranged for you to stay with a family. So that was much less expensive than staying in a hotel. Those might be some options, but I would say to try and see if he could get a fellowship or a scholarship that would let him do that work without paying. Because one thing about international law, it only pays if you're doing international commercial law. You know, you're putting together businesses across boundaries. If you want to do international public law, between nations, treaty law, you end up working for the government and or non-governmental organizations, and they don't pay as well. So you don't want to have a lot of debt to pay back what you had to borrow to pay for the schooling you got. That, unfortunately, it's all I would think. That said, because of his vast experience in the operations of the Russian legal system, he might have something to offer that other places say, hey, we want you to come, we'll make a deal. We'll let you come study here, but you have to then teach these courses on how the Russian legal system works. So I wish him luck. It's everything costs too much. It's too expensive.
Yeah, so is it the only way to work for a corporation? I'm saying corporation, I mean money, right?
Right. Sometimes it seems that way. Corporations in the United States will pay for people's legal studies if you work for them. So that would help. But then you're working 16 hours a day and you only take time off to sleep. Does he have children?
He's single. He's okay.
Oh, it's fine then. He can go now. No
he has
problem.
plenty of energy.
Yes, no, he's got no problem. All right, good. I wish him luck. I'm sorry it's all. They might know more, because I know that they try and help people do those studies. So I talked to Viola and our colleague here in the back. Pajalista, any other questions? What is the Russian